Jerry Johnston has written this book, Why They Die, Curing the Death Wish in Our Kids, and he has been a part of the programming this whole week and next week as well, God willing. And he has a great wealth of experience dealing with young people as a youth evangelist for, what, 17 years?
Yes.
Jerry, and then you've been a pastor in Kansas City for a number of years. But you've really researched this. You've got some terrific anecdotes and insights. You don't claim to be a scientist, but you are a pastor. You're well-trained in theology. You've got a heart for kids, and it really comes through in the book. Now, the theme this week and next is rescue and restore. You have a whole chapter called How to Rescue Your Friend, and you give some very practical suggestions as to how to rescue someone who is showing suicidal tendencies. And the first thing that you say is read the signals and take an interest. We've talked a little bit about the signals. We need to review that. And then how does one take an interest in someone who is closing their world in on themselves? That, to me, is a real critical question.
Yeah, usually these are in extremes. You know, a formerly introverted teen who becomes extroverted. They begin to kind of get happy. I'm going to die soon, believe it or not. The opposite is true. The extroverted, gregarious kid who becomes silent and withdrawn. You know, today we applaud the Toronto Public Schools because at 11 a.m. today, 250,000 students here in Toronto, 40,000 faculty are going to have a moment of silence on behalf of Amanda Todd at 11 a.m. And what a great gesture that is. And, you know, as we look back, we always say, what if I would have said something? What if I would have done something? When I saw Amanda's picture on the news feeds early this morning, it reminded me that, you know, just the right word at just the right time can make an incredible difference. We have suicidal gestures. It's the kid who slits his wrist but not deep enough to kill himself. They take some pills but not enough to be lethal or deadly. And we have to realize that these are desperate people, and sometimes their own son or daughter. And parental pride, parental neglect can leave a child in a very dangerous situation.
What about the business of reaching out to them? As I said a moment ago, they're in many cases closing themselves in and perhaps defending themselves against intervention, directly or indirectly. Or are they always in a position where they're crying out for help? That's a hard one for me to understand.
That one mother that we walked with on the Out of Darkness walk, her son was almost a signless suicide, she thought, until she looked back. Again, kind of a teen romance. He had sent a love letter to a girlfriend. She was non-responsive. And then he arranged everything on his dresser and went out back to kill himself so he would make a mess inside the house. It was meticulously and methodically planned and thought through. Sue was walking with her family because she was saying, you know, there was too much silence. We should have said something. We should have initiated a conversation. And he cocooned himself. Yeah. So if you can't get through, you got to get somebody who can. Yeah. I've had a lot of parents who brought a suicidal son or daughter to me through the years, and I'm very upfront. I mean, I kind of cut through and just say, hey, Tony, what's happening? The excessive use of drugs, the excessive use of alcohol. Katie, beautiful girl who you'd never think was extremely promiscuous in the midst of her depression. Those are signs. There's a lot of signs that accompany this.
And that relates to your second point in rescuing your friend, and that is to be a detective. Be intentional.
Well, you know, one of the parents said to me, we weren't reading their Facebook, we weren't reading their Twitter, their Tumblr, you know, the whole bit. You have to know what your kids are saying. Suicidal ideation is expressed in a variety of ways. It's expressed sometimes in the music that we're drawn to, the activity. But if a parent doesn't even know what their kid is saying or how a peer of their son or daughter is responding to them on Facebook, how in the world are they going to be there when the midnight hour comes?
And if a parent says, well, if I'm being nosy, I shouldn't be nosy, I'm intruding on my child's privacy, is that an impulse that is to be denied?
Every parent that we heard this week, and we're going to hear several next week, all said, I wish I would have been more nosy.
Yeah.
Because my son or daughter is dead. And there is a point that when we are intervening in a life on the edge, that as a parent, it is your right to do what you need to do. You know, Christy and I have 3 children. They're all raised now, but I can look back at all 3 when I'm convinced there was a specific time that the enemy, Satan, was trying to take down all 3 of my children. And it was all 3 in different ways. Had we not been praying together as a husband and wife, and had we not really been talking, we would have never been able to intervene.
You also talk about listening carefully. It is true that we hear people sometimes, but we don't listen to them. Expand on that a bit. What do you mean by listening carefully?
Well, it's a real art to listen, as you know. Yeah. I mean, I've always said it's amazing what people will tell you if you'll just shut up and let them talk.
Yeah.
And as a parent, you know, we can have this authoritarian lecture all the time going on.
Yeah.
But really, the insightful parent allows their children to communicate. I always took different kids of mine on trips with me. It's amazing what they'll tell you in a rental car on the way to an event.
Yeah.
In a hotel room when you're just flicking through the TV. If you don't have those design times, if a son or daughter's not talking to me or you, they're going to talk to somebody else.
Oh, sure, sure. What about the, you give several anecdotes here, which I was amazed that you were able to capture as many as you did. But what about the situation where you're watching for the signs, you're listening carefully, you're being a detective, and you're making no progress? I'm sure there's many parents right now who are in that situation. Is this where you bring in an outside person, a professional, a counselor, an experienced friend? You know, at that point of desperation, what can be done?
Well, you know, we talked about mental illness in almost every broadcast.
Yeah.
And we are not denying the fact that some people with a suicidal ideation have a mental illness. If you're a teenager and you're bipolar and you don't know it, if you're a teenager and you're manic depressive and you don't know it, you need help. And there are such reputable physicians and psychiatrists and sociologists, many of them who believe in God. I've had the privilege to work with so many of them across the nation. We have to reach out to somebody with expertise. And there is a biblical spiritual response. But beyond that, there are people who can come in. And that, in the back of the book, we give all those resources, so many experts that are there to help.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is, and you make no bones about this too, that even though a depression, for instance, can have all kinds of spiritual symptoms,